Welcome back to our YouTube channel, The Book Digest. In today's episode, we're diving into a powerful and, honestly, life-changing summary of Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts by Sally M. Winston. This book, it offers a totally new way to look at something that, let's be real, a lot of us deal with but almost nobody wants to talk about.
You know, have you ever had a thought just pop into your head that completely shocked you? Like a really bizarre image? Or a disturbing idea that just came out of nowhere? Something you would never, ever act on? Yeah. If that sounds familiar, you are so not alone. And this book kicks off with a really radical idea about what those thoughts actually mean.
And here it is. This is the core message of the entire book, right here. Get this. The thoughts themselves, they aren't the problem. It's our reaction to them that causes all the pain. It's the panic, the shame, and that desperate, exhausting struggle to just make them go away. That struggle, that's the real issue.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We've got 5 key ideas to cover. First, we'll talk about how pretty much everyone has these weird thoughts. Then, we'll dig into why some of them get so sticky. After that, the whole paradox of trying to control them. Then, we'll get to the good stuff, a radically new approach for dealing with them. And finally, we'll look at what recovery actually truly looks like.
All right, first things first, let's just blow up the biggest myth right out of the gate. The idea that having these thoughts means you're broken or there's something deeply wrong with you. Let's tackle that head on.
So, it turns out this is a universal human thing. Research shows that whether the thoughts are violent or sexual or just plain bizarre, pretty much everyone has them. I love how the book puts it. They're like mental spam, you know? For most people, the brain's spam filter just catches it and moves on. But the key thing to remember is that almost everyone gets the spam.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The actual content of the thoughts, it's pretty much the same for people who get really anxious about them and people who don't. The only difference, the key variable, is the reaction. One person just goes, huh, weird, and moves on, dismissing it as mental noise. The other person, they grab onto it, absolutely horrified, convinced it means something awful about who they are. So the big takeaway, and this is huge, is that the thought itself is meaningless. It's just noise.
Okay, so that naturally leads to the next big question, right? If these thoughts are totally normal, why do they get so stuck for some of us? Why do they become so powerful and just refuse to leave? In other words, what makes a thought sticky?
Well, Winston draws this really brilliant line in the sand. You have your fleeting thoughts. They just pop in and pop right back out. No big deal. But then you have sticky thoughts. It's often the exact same kind of thought, but for whatever reason, it's like mental Velcro. It snags our attention, triggers this massive wave of anxiety, all because we've decided it's not just random mental chatter, we've decided it's super important and dangerous. And there's actually a name for the mechanism that makes them sticky. It's a type of thinking trap called importance of thoughts fusion. Basically, this is when your brain makes a huge mistake. It starts to believe that just thinking something is just as significant, just as bad as actually doing it, or that the thought reveals some deep, dark secret about your true character. The thought and the action get fused together. And once that fusion happens, it kicks off this nasty, vicious cycle. So check it out. Step 1, the intrusive thought pops up. Step 2, you immediately interpret it as dangerous or super meaningful. That flips a switch, and step 3, your body's alarm system, hello anxiety, goes off. Then, and this is the really tricky part, that physical feeling of anxiety, that pit in your stomach, feels like proof that the thought must be important. And that just makes the thought stickier, harder to let go of, and the whole cycle just spins up again, even stronger.
So, naturally, when a scary thought like that shows up, what's our first instinct? To fight it, right? To push it away, wrestle it to the ground, and just get rid of it. But it turns out that's pretty much the worst thing you can possibly do. In fact, you know what? Let's do a little experiment right now. It's super simple. You can do it with me.
Okay, you ready? For the next 5 seconds, I have one job for you. Whatever you do, do not think about a white bear. I'm serious. No polar bears, no cartoon white bears, nothing. Don't think about it. Go.
So, how'd that go? I'm willing to bet a big fluffy white bear just paraded right through your brain, wasn't it? You probably thought about it more in those 5 seconds than you have in the last month.
Yeah, this is a classic psychological effect. They call it the paradox of thought suppression. And here's why it happens. In order to not think about something, a part of your brain has to keep checking to see if you're thinking about it. It's like posting a guard at the door with a picture of the white bear and telling him, "Don't let this guy in." What's the guard thinking about all day? the white bear. Every time you try to push it away, it just bounces back even stronger.
And this same exact paradox is what fuels that constant need for reassurance. You know, when you ask someone, this thought doesn't make me a bad person, right? It feels like a relief for about 5 seconds. But what you're actually doing is teaching your brain that the thought was so dangerous that it needed to be checked. It's a short-term fix that makes the problem way worse in the long run.
Okay, so if fighting the thoughts and trying to control them just makes them stronger, then what in the world are we supposed to do? Well, this is where we get to the heart of the book's solution. And fair warning, it's pretty counterintuitive.
The new approach is all about changing your relationship with the thought, not trying to get rid of the thought itself. And it's a 4-step process. Step 1, you just label it. Oh, that's an intrusive thought. Step 2, and this is the tough one, you just allow it to be there. You don't fight it, you don't engage, you just let it float. Step 3 is to diffuse from it, which is just about creating a bit of distance. And finally, step 4, you just let it go and bring your attention back to whatever you are doing in the present moment.
So what is this diffusion thing? It's really just about creating some space. Instead of being caught up inside the thought, you step back and become an observer of the thought. It's like you're in a movie theater, and instead of believing you're in the movie, you realize you're just sitting in the audience watching it on a screen. Simple phrases like saying to yourself, "I notice I'm having the thought that," can create that little bit of separation. You're not arguing with it, you're not agreeing with it, you're just acknowledging the noise and seeing it for what it is, just a thought.
And that brings us to our last point, which is maybe the most profound piece of this entire puzzle. What is the actual goal of all this? What does getting better really mean?
See, so much of this struggle is really just a desperate, exhausting search for 100% certainty. We want a guarantee. Promise me I'll never do that. Prove to me that I'm a good person. The thing is, life just doesn't offer those kinds of guarantees. And that constant, impossible hunt for certainty, that's the very fuel that keeps the entire engine of anxiety running.
So the real goal, it isn't to get certainty. The real goal is to build up your tolerance for uncertainty. It's about getting to a place where you can say, you know what, maybe that thought means something, maybe it doesn't, and I can live with not knowing. I can accept that uncertainty and still choose to focus on my life and the things that matter to me. That is a skill, and honestly, it's a superpower.
And this quote from the authors just sums it all up perfectly. Recovery is the transformation of one's relationship with thoughts, not the elimination of them. Let that sink in. The goal isn't to have a perfectly silent, empty mind. That's impossible. The goal is just to get to a place where those thoughts can be there, in the background, without you having to let them run the whole show.
So, I want to leave you with this one last question to think about. What if your mind isn't a battlefield that you have to conquer? What if instead it's more like the sky? And your thoughts are just the clouds. Some are dark and stormy, some are light and fluffy, but they all just drift by. And you don't have to fight them or get rid of them. You can just let them pass. That shift in perspective, that's everything. And that's what this book is all about.